Good afternoon. Good afternoon. If you could please kindly get seated, and we're having Raouf, who is joining now. Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be here this afternoon. I know it has been a long day, so I'm glad that you found time to join this important event, co-hosted by Japan, Netherlands, UNHCR, and the World Bank. So, honored ministers, distinguished guests, thanks very much for joining this event. 4 years ago was the first GRF, and since that event, we think that we have collectively accomplished quite a great deal in supporting refugee and host communities. But considering the current context, we need to look ahead, and we need to be bolder and even more ambitious. In this context, today's discussion of the role of the Global Concessional Financing Facility, GCFF, is timely. The GCFF has become a key instrument to support development responses for protracted displacement. And as you may know, GCFF has supported 6 benefiting countries, some of which are represented here: Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Jordan, Lebanon, and Moldova. And it's my pleasure to announce today that GCFF this week added Armenia to this list, given this role of supporting refugees recently displaced from Nagorno-Karabakh. Now, in the seventh years of GCFF operation, we believe that now it's really a mature instrument that has track record. To date, as you may know, GCFF has approved 850 million grants, which has allowed to leverage 6.4 billion concessional loans. So it has allowed a government to attend to the need of refugees and host communities and show the solidarity to address this public challenge, which is refugees, dealing with refugees. So today, what we would like to do, we have a distinguished panel with us, and we will see the extent to which GCFF, beyond these achievements, these financing achievements, and the result on the ground and the impact on refugees and host communities, it's really for us a strategic platform that brings together donors, the UN in partnership with refugee host countries to transform displacement situation into net development gain. To help us understand the role, the value, but importantly as well the future of this innovative development financing tool, it is my real pleasure to turn now to our panel of distinguished colleagues who have kindly agreed to share their perspective with us. So I will start with Minister Zeina Token, Minister from Jordan. And we know that since the establishment of GCFF, Jordan has received support across multiple sectors aimed at helping refugees find host communities. And I had the privilege last year visiting Amman to see the project financed by GCFF. Madam Minister, in your view, how has this support helped to move the needle in improving the life of refugees and host communities? And what are your strong and major takeaways? Over to you, Madam Minister.
Thank you, Sukaina, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Sukaina, as you probably know, and many of colleagues from the donors side here with us today and the UN, Jordan has played a key role in designing the GCFF, the facility, since its outset. We started putting a request to the World Bank and to the international community on behalf of Jordan and Lebanon as middle-income countries facing refugee crisis to have access to concessional borrowing and more of trust funds. The facility has enabled the government and partners to work jointly and together to push a more efficient and innovative approaches to address the protracted Syrian refugee crisis in Jordan. Putting things into context, we still have 1.37 million Syrians in Jordan, 10% in refugee camps, 231,000 Syrian children were born in Jordan over the past decade. 48% are still below the age of 18 years old. And in total, as a percentage of the population, 1/3 of our population are registered refugees, either with UNRWA or UNHCR. In addition to working with the international humanitarian agency to ensure basic needs, Jordan has, with the support of the international community, was able to provide support to education, health services, subsidized utilities, and to access, for refugees to access livelihood opportunities and the labor market. Such facility has indeed helped a lot and pushed the needle on many fronts. We've benefited by 15 projects so far, I think leveraging around 2.8 billion in terms of MDB financing, which means that each dollar coming from the GCFF has helped in leveraging $4 to $6 in development assistance. Our program spanned across multi sectors that were supported by the GCFF. It also helped us to put the Jordan Compact that was adopted in 2016 as a holistic approach, promoting a longer-term approach that looks at Syrian refugees as productive resources than temporary refugees, and therefore assisted us move the needle on improving the livelihoods, the lives of not only Syrian refugees, but host communities. If I may give some examples, in terms of service delivery, GCFF co-financed programs help provide inclusive education services through double shift schools to over 160,000 Syrian children, and subsidized healthcare services and also contributed to the introducing the provision, including the provision of COVID vaccination to refugees. On the economic opportunities front, and this is very much tallies with the Jordan Compact, and in promoting refugee self-reliance under the GCFF financed programs, we were able to adopt policies that allowed Syrians to have access to the formal economy, economic opportunities through flexible work permits across economic sectors, including agriculture, digital services, but also allowed for home-based businesses for Syrian refugees inside and outside camps, and mainly in the sectors of food processing, handicrafts, tailoring, mostly occupied by women. We managed also to provide some skilling and training programs in some sectors, upgrading certain skills, but also with the support of the GCFF and looping in the private sector, we managed to put in place a guarantee facility that provided support to over 60 MSMEs since 2020. The GCFF Economic Opportunities Program, we had 2 programs in place that were supported by the facility, leveraging IBRD World Bank resources, have provided over 340,000 flexible work permits that were free of charge to Syrian refugees. And the number continues to grow, but it helped us to formalize a good chunk of the Syrian refugees working in Jordan with these flexible work permits that we've been providing for free of charge for 7 years this year. The co-finance program are also playing an emerging role at the Refugee Climate Nexus. Probably most of you would know that Jordan faces the dual challenge or exposure when it comes to extreme climate change, especially in extreme water scarcity, but also with a large refugee influx. We've put together with the support of the GCFF and many of the partners programs aimed at improving water services, expanding wastewater services as well in areas that are hosted there with a heavy presence of Syrian refugees. And we've been also introducing some programs working on climate smart agricultural solution. Key takeaways, if I may, or lessons learned, and you mentioned some of them. It's indeed an innovative financing tool that enabled Jordan and I assume other host countries to include Syrian refugees as part of their national development reform plans, including service delivery. And as you just eloquently said, Sukaina, it's definitely a strategic platform of a more coordinated approach in terms of response. Host communities, donors, MDBs, the UN coming all together, looking at challenges, opportunities, requirements on the ground. It's definitely continues. I've been advocating for its replenishment. I know Jordan has taken a good share of over the past almost 8 years since its inception, but it definitely provides sustainable, longer term and predictable financing schemes. And it also allowed the private sector to come and help in the response when it comes to the Syrian refugee, supporting the Syrian refugee crisis. Putting also, as I said, that we've been pushing for its replenishment, not only for the benefit of Jordan, but for the benefit of other host countries, the 7 countries. I feel that it remains a critical tool, offsetting some of the increasing cost of financing that we've been seeing over the past over a year now, offsetting some of the risks and that we've been seeing arising in the case of Jordan, the conflicts in the region, and the continuity in providing critical services. Our response plan this year and the support coming from the GCFF over the years has been accounted against the Jordan response plan is 22% funded. And we've been seeing some serious donor fatigue, be it because of other priorities there in terms of whether humanitarian or the climate agenda. But I think with the leveraging effect that these tools provide for countries that have been doing global public good remains critical. I'll stop here, Sukaina. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Minister Torkan. So I won't summarize because I think you put things very eloquently. So at the end, we will be able to have the major takeaway from this session. Let me turn now to Moldova, to Minister Alexei Buzu, Minister of Labor and Social Protection of the government of Moldova. So Moldova has been really quick in addressing the issue of Ukrainian refugees. And I would like to know, Minister, how was your partnering with GCFF allowed you to respond rapidly to the crisis of Ukrainian refugees, and how GCFF has helped Moldova in its development support to communities and refugees? Over to you.
Thank you. It's a true pleasure and honor to be within this distinguished panel. And oh boy, you know, after a long day, it's 6 o'clock in the evening, this full room of dedicated people talking about concessional financing. I really need to put a show here. Look, Moldova has been the new kid on the block. We've been part of this wonderful program since 2022. And I think beyond what you said, Madam Minister, I think it enabled us to both address the kind of the emerging crisis, but also I think I look at this as a way to transform, because whenever you have a crisis, your weaknesses are truly exposed. And I would just briefly mention a couple of programs that we were able to put in place. And the first one I think I'm the most proud of, which is, along with the refugee crisis, the price of energy in Moldova increased 8 times. And without any support from the government, majority of the households in Moldova would go into poverty. And we were able to create this energy vulnerability fund, which in a way was, to me, a truly innovative tool and program to, one, support households in Moldova in a very targeted way. So it enabled us to collect data from three different sources. One is the energy suppliers, to public, all the public databases. So for instance, if a household will apply to the program, we will know what type of energy and how much they consumed last year. We will know from the treasury all the pension funds, social accounts, whatever the income they have, and then the household inputted the income they had over the last 6 months. And it enabled us to target, to kind of measure the energy vulnerability of every household. So in a way, we were able to support families in Moldova, including refugee families, that they came to Moldova and faced this high price of energy. Two, it was done in a very inclusive and targeted way, so we were able to help more households on a lower income scale. And then the third one, because it was targeted, it enabled us to save energy. So because we helped households, it did not incentivize households to consume more. So this was last year, and because the program was so successful, it's now part of our portfolio of programs at the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. And more than this, we were able to incorporate other winter support program within this one. So it's a kind of a transformational program for us. And again, this year we have 65% of households in Moldova applying. Is the biggest program that the government is implementing, is the biggest one. More than half of Moldovan citizens are benefiting from this. And of course, it's targeted. It helps the most vulnerable families, including Ukrainian refugees. And the one thing that I'm proud of is that it's in a way, it transformed the way the state, the government interacts with citizens, because all you need to do is come with your ID card and your bill, and that's it. And it takes 5 minutes to register online. If you don't have digital skills, if you don't have a tablet or a phone, there's a social worker waiting for you to support you, and it takes 10 minutes at most. And the rest of the work is done by us. So we cross-tab all the databases we have, and then the system helps us to understand the energy vulnerability. So to me, beyond leveraging funds, beyond helping the government to face the crisis, it transformed the welfare state in Moldova. It's part of our DNA, and now to us, this is the benchmark, and we're looking to different programs and say, what we can learn from this program and improve, right? And beyond the social protection. So for instance, how we can support farmers who faced droughts, how we can support different groups facing crisis. The other program that we were able to put in place is to rapidly ramp up a network of about 136 temporary refugee accommodation centers. In Moldova, more than 90% of refugees live with host families, but for the most vulnerable, we had to create this network of centers, because attached to them, you have elderly refugees with disabilities, so we attached different health and social services. And the last program that is over the medium term. You know, we have about 48,000 children, refugee children in Moldova. Only about 2,000 go to school or kindergarten or childcare. Majority of them still do online education, and to me that's a disgrace. And we need to beef up the capacity, increase the capacity. So part of the financing, part of the program that we have within GSFF is to increase the capacity for childcare and school capacity to make sure that Ukrainian children go to school, and because they'll be the ones to rebuild their country. They need all the support they have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. I'll turn now to Colombia. So Minister Elizabeth Taylor Jay, Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the government of Colombia. Colombia has led the way in many areas in terms of the refugee very progressively in our view. So what was the value added in a context of a country that already has strong policy and strong engagement? What was the value added of GCFF in supporting migrants and refugees and host communities in Colombia? And
Yes,
as well, if you could tell us, how do you see the future of GCFF?
Okay.
Because we said this has to be forward-looking.
Okay. Yes. Good evening to the survivors.
The geek squad.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and thank you for I think this very important session. And for Colombia, we must say that. That the support that we have received from this mechanism have been outstanding, through which we have generated a great impact. And just to maybe give you some context, in Colombia we have some legal tools in the country that allow us to, of course, to receive and provide services to migrants and refugees. As an example of this, we developed this temporal statute for protection for the Venezuelan migrants that allows these migrants to be subjects of rights within our country, granting them protection and access to goods and services in equal status as the rest of Colombians. This means that they are incorporated into the health service, education, labor, and social security. To date, we have approved already 1.9 million of these permits. So we have 1.9 million Venezuelans with this permit, and we have at least approved, and 1.8 millions have their documents already. International financing and cooperation have been fundamental for us to really progress to this state, and to really allow the Colombian institutionality to, I would say, to bear with the load that I'm not saying that we don't want to do it. What I'm saying is that it's still, it adds to all the challenges that we had in our country to ensure social protection, health, education, and to our Colombian nationals. And this mechanism, as how I said, it have be of very important impact in our country, and some of the aspects that we would like to highlight, for instance, with the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank. We have projects for $1,918 million, which are related to providing health to migrant and also the recipient communities. 134 million of this comes directly from this mechanism, from the global concessional financing facility. And important to say that that our public policies also is possible to progress our public policies because of this. 1.2 million citizens, Venezuelan citizens, are covered with these funds that for health system, and we have also provided health care for almost 10,000 women that have gave birth in our country, also from Venezuela. We at this moment we are preparing a second generation of these projects, and we are seeking also with other financing strategy to make sure that we can cover this very important, I would say, ambition that we have. So we have like working with the fund to combat HIV and tuberculosis and malaria, and also we are working with the fund for migrations of the Inter-American Development Bank. We continue to work with you all and hope that it's going to have reciprocity, and of course we are seeking on other type of finances, including also innovative finances at the global level, that matches also with our purpose of having finance for climate action and combined with other instruments that will help us to be the country of the life power, and also achieve total peace, which it have to be embedded into all our public policies. So thank you so much for your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let me turn now to Mrs. Pascal Grottenhuis, Director General for International Cooperation for the Government of Netherlands. So my question to you, as you know, Netherlands, and I just would like to take this opportunity to thank you, has stepped up significantly its support in this agenda in general, but in GCFF in particular. You will be the incoming co-chair of the steering committee, so we welcome you and congratulate you for that. So from a partner point of view, what do you see as the value added of an instrument like GCFF, and where do you see the future of GCFF?
Thank you very much for the question. And I also want to thank the very esteemed previous speaker about talking about the added value of this instrument. I think you did it really well. So I will talk a little bit about what we think from a donor perspective. We also see the added value very much of this facility, also as a donor instrument. So for us, the GCFF is about three things. It's about recognizing the value of refugee hosting as a global public good, and I think that was said before, and the generous contribution that the middle-income countries make to this global public good. Secondly, it's about recognizing the fact that refugee hosting at scale comes at a price, and that middle-income countries shouldn't be paying the price on their own. They need and they deserve structural support in dealing with the challenges that refugee hosting brings. And thirdly, it's about optimism and it's about hope. And it's about creating a real-life opportunity for the middle-income countries to leverage their generous contribution to this global public good, also for their own development. And I think the stories that we just heard confirm to me that in the past 8 years, this instrument has proven itself to fulfill some of these hopes initially vested in it. But for us, GCFF is also about one other, and it's less tangible, but just as important. It's about national ownership of refugee responses. The instrument is by design. It fully recognizes and supports the primacy of hosting countries' own national development goals. Countries only borrow for what they generally see as their strategic priority, and GCFF is an instrument that simply helps include displaced people in these priorities and to leverage more and to make more accessible loans to fund them. So this particular feature of the facility is of great value to us, and we will continue supporting it throughout our tenure as the new co-chair, as you already mentioned, and we're very proud of the facility, which started only 2 days ago, so we're still a little bit modest as well. We are very proud also to be sharing this chair with our distinguished colleagues from Moldova, and we look forward very much to a fruitful cooperation. You mentioned we're a big partner, we're a large partner. We have contributed about $80 million to the GCFF. We have also facilitated the access to it for 2 new countries, Moldova in 2022, and recently, as 2 days ago, also the Republic of Armenia. I think in the many tragedies and disasters and conflicts we are witnessing, the Republic of Armenia has experienced a tragedy of its own this fall. And within a couple of weeks, almost a full population of Nagorno-Karabakh has escaped the hostilities and moved to Armenia. And the country's population has grown by 3% within a span of a few weeks, and over 30% of them are children. And these people have been welcomed with open arms and given access to all services as well as to work, on par with citizens. And we are very happy and proud to announce that we will be contributing another 10 million to the facility next year to support loans to Armenia towards this generous response. As a new co-chair, we also hope that we will be able to contribute to the facility at similar levels for the coming 4 years and continue also mobilizing resources for all other benefiting countries. We also hope to be able to work with other colleagues on expanding the modalities of funding and membership to allow for even more tailored responses to different types of refugee crises that we are seeing in the world. We are very proud to be able to contribute to the present and future of this instrument and to continue the support to the generosity of its benefiting countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So to Moldova, you're not the newest kid in the block. So we have now Armenia, which is both
2 days.
Yes, which is both, I believe, bad and good news. Bad news in the sense that behind the numbers of 100,000 people, it's about people, it's about lives, it's about suffering. That's the bad news. The good news is that very quickly, as a platform, GCFF has allowed Armenia to get support, and we'll hear from you later. So I'll turn now to JICA, to Mr. Tanaka Akihiko, President of JICA for the government of Japan. I'm going to ask you exactly the same question from partner perspective. What do you see as the value of GCFF, and what do you see as well as the future of GCFF? Over to you.
Well, thank you very much for giving this opportunity. It is a very important subject that we should pay close attention to. The question is what we see the role and value and also the future of GCFF. First, I think this GCFF is an instrument that can realize what we call the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus, the HDP Nexus. It can do so by addressing humanitarian needs and development objectives of refugee hosting countries at the same time. Second, it is an innovative financial mechanism that reduces the burden of refugee hosting countries, especially the middle-income countries, and allows participating countries to provide much needed global public goods. Let me elaborate on these points a little bit more. This year, we witnessed wars and conflicts often combined with other types of crises to displace many people. On top of that, the majority of those who were displaced by past crises are not yet ready to return to their home countries. Therefore, traditional humanitarian support alone cannot satisfy its responsibility to help the displaced people and ease pressure on host countries. Indeed, the host countries of refugees are receiving so much pressure on behalf of the international community. I think GCFF is an innovative mechanism for sharing that burden. I commend the World Bank and other partners for devising it. GCFF aims to provide concessional finance to the middle-income host countries of refugees through a combination of loans and grants. This innovative structure is significant as it can address humanitarian needs and achieve development impact at the same time, as I said. It supports the development objectives host countries with due consideration of what refugee needs through loans. It also meets the immediate funding requirements through grants. The GCFF, therefore, allows participating countries to address global challenges with externalities by providing much needed global public goods. Well, Japan has been a strong supporter and the largest contributor to the GCFF and has so far contributed $183 million to it. JICA in particular contributes via an innovative financing arrangements with IBRD that involves market transaction on concessional loan. I'm very proud of the fact that we have helped raise $83 million for the GCFF with this joint arrangement. In addition to contributing directly to GCFF, JICA supports host countries by co-financing alongside MDB's projects that benefit from the GCFF. We have co-financed with IBRD for development policy operations in Moldova and Jordan. JICA's technical cooperation and policy advice also work in tandem with financial assistance from the World Bank's IDA refugee window. JICA provides support for the capacity development of host government and communities, as well as to improve self-reliance and living conditions among refugees and other displaced people. As an illustration, JICA supports Ugandan local governments in designing community infrastructure for the World Bank to their finance. This is yet another way of partnership among international community members. I mention these examples because I believe reinforcing the partnership of humanitarian, development, and peace actors is indispensable in responding complex and protracted refugees crisis and for the future of the GCFF. We should take stock of how the GCFF's innovative finance structure and other development instruments help address humanitarian needs and development objectives so that we can further work together to promote global public goods. I think today's session is such an occasion, and so they can be the beginning of the future GCFF. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And indeed, Japan is now the largest contributor, and we are very grateful for that. I'll turn now to Frank Bousquet, Deputy Director, IMF. I'd like to say that Frank is very humble, but he's one of the founding fathers, of the GCFF. He is as well the force behind the FCV strategy at the World Bank. So, Frank, in a world with high interest rate, high debt, compounding crisis, and limited availability of concessional financing for many middle-income countries, what value an instrument like GCFF has for you, from your standpoint, from the IMF? And could you also give us some insight, some policy insight from IMF perspective on the latest analysis at the macro level or the impact of migrants and refugee countries in refugee countries like Colombia, for instance?
Thank you, Sukrina. I have to say it's a pleasure to be here today. I would like, of course, to thank you for the invitation, as well as Japan, Netherlands, UNHCR, co-organizing this session, but also, like it was mentioned, really recognize at the end of the day that there are only a few actors that are in driving seat, those countries hosting the refugee. So having some of us among ourselves today, Colombia, Moldova, Jordan, I think it merits to be said. Just before responding to your question, Sukrina, don't worry, I will not go more than 4 minutes. I will just go on some key features of this facility as I see it. One, exactly. We talk a lot about HDP. It's actually the HDP nexus in practice. The whole point about asking UNHCR to join this facility was for what? Because at the end of the day, it was mainly an initiative with the UN, with the World Bank and the Islamic Development Bank, was to bring the expertise of the agency and working to make sure that development partners were talking to humanitarian actors. And I can tell you that the UNHCR added value regarding the policy content when we talk about work permits, when we talk about access to school education and so on, was critical. So that's one. And secondly, it's to respond to the fact that at the end of the day, there is today clearly some shortfall in terms of humanitarian financing, and therefore the need for development actor to provide financing on a more sustainable basis. Second point, it's also in terms of financing at scale. I mean, it's amazing all the work that has been done when you look at the $6 billion provided in terms of concessional financing, and that was the whole point about the initiative. Instead of having small projects, can we go at scale? Because unfortunately, the crisis is at scale. Third point, beyond the projects are very important. Those who merit concessional financing have specific criteria. It's also moving the needle on the policy aspects. So when you hear Mr. Toucan, who by the way was at the start of the GCFF, and I would like to recognize an amazing role as well. The whole focus about bringing UNHCR was actually to help with all the other donors. I see Eric Mayer here from the US, but many others who are really looking at what is really the value in a sustainable base. It's not about humanitarian financing, it's about the policy that you are talking about. And it's a pleasure to hear all the progress being made. And the last 2 points, it's about MDB cooperation. Let's not forget it was done with the Islamic Development Bank, but also benefiting for other MDBs. So it's good to also making sure that the talks go into actions. It's a platform where MDBs, multilateral development banks, are talking to each other to make sure there is a unified approach to same topic. And the last 2 points was actually the prevention side. The way it was set up initially was not the GCFF. It was the MENA CFF, with 2 benefiting countries, Jordan and Lebanon. And at that time, Eric Mayer remember very well, we said maybe one day they could be benefiting other crises. We hope not, because obviously expanding the GCFF is not good. It shows a worsening landscape. But who knows? Can we be prepared? Can we actually make sure that we are not reinventing the wheel every time there is a crisis? And that's how actually Jordan and Lebanon make the case of sharing this facility with potentially other countries. And that's what we see today. So yes, it takes lessons on the global public good agenda that go beyond the fragility, conflict, and violence. It's about providing concessionality for countries that are opening their border because it's a real global public good. Sorry, could not resist in terms of commenting on the added value going beyond these aspects. Economic forecast, unfortunately, it's not necessarily extremely good in the sense that we have a forecast growth of 3% this year, as our latest projections, going to 2.9% next year. And it means what, concretely? It means that many countries, let's not forget that 75% of refugees, they are where? In middle income and low-income countries. And many of those countries, they have to face difficult trade-off in terms of high debt level, in terms of high interest rate, in terms of low growth. And therefore, what it means is that public finance is harder to balance. In this context, concessional financing is actually a real added value. And the last but not least, you asked me about what is really the impact for countries that are hosting refugee migrants. We just did a research last year. It was done by our Latin American department, West Hemisphere, on the regional spillover of the Venezuelan crisis, 7.7 million, focusing on Colombia, but also neighboring countries. Two key takeaways. First one is that, of course, there are some fiscal adjustment, some short-term pressure on the budget, but there is also sizable long-term, medium, long-term gain in what? In productivity and in growth. Of course, this is even facilitated when there is higher level of education of migrants and refugees to the countries. The second point, there was also the analysis was looking at what is really the gain potentially if policies are applied to the neighboring countries. And we found that the migration from Venezuela could increase real GDP in Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Chile by 2.5 to 4.5 percentage points by 2030. So it's important to look at it. There are some trade-offs, typically, but also recognizing the potential gain in terms of growth. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. And I think that you made a perfect segue for me to hand over now to Raouf, Assistant Secretary General for Operation at UNHCR. So UNHCR is a very important partner for GCFF almost since the beginning. So Raouf, how, in your view, GCFF has been complementing UNHCR action? We heard about, as Frank said, this is HDP in action. But from your standpoint, how do you see this? And in particular, we see unprecedented displacement crisis. Every time we hear those numbers, 114 million of forcibly displaced people, including 36 million refugees, and still counting. So with this magnitude of crisis, how do you see GCFF playing a role jointly with UNHCR?
No, thank you very, very much, Sukana. I'm very, very pleased to be here and also to hear the history of the GCFF. It's clear that this is an instrument that has helped us and the world understand that in forced displacement, there is a humanitarian dimension, but there is a very, very important development dimension. And the impact of forced displacement, especially the numbers that we're seeing, is not just a humanitarian impact, it's a development impact on countries. So the GCFF has helped us underline that. It has also, and listening to Jordan, Moldova, Colombia, it's clear that the GCFF has helped respond to very serious concern and issues and consequences that the countries were facing in healthcare, in education, need to make sure that refugees remain self-reliant. And a very important point that was mentioned by a number of countries, it allowed inclusive education. I think the minister from Jordan spoke of the 2 shifts. So that, and the GCFF has allowed that to happen, and this is what the Global Compact on Refugees is about, it's inclusion and making sure that we avoid parallel system and we make sure that we include the displaced people in the response. So that, I think, the GCFF has definitely allowed. It has also helped, and I think listening to the minister from Moldova, social cohesion, making sure that it's not just refugees but also host communities receiving support is essential. And in a forced displacement situation, the risk of social cohesion collapsing is extremely high. It has also helped, and we've heard that also from from Jordan, it has helped evolve policies, national policies, when it comes to refugees. Another important point, and you said it, Sukena, the Armenia, or the arrival of people from the Karabakh region into Armenia is a crisis that is more than a month, 2 months old, and immediately there has been a response from an instrument which one would describe as a development instrument taking more time. So it has also been an instrument which has been able to respond very fast, and that's important. But listening to countries, it has been very good, but moving forward, it is insufficient. It's first insufficient because, as you said, we see more and more crises. 114, and unfortunately, looking at what is happening in the world, the 114 million refugees is going to be surpassed fast, and we need to have instruments that can respond to that. So that's the first reality. So we need more resources. We need to make sure that the GCFF, and appreciation also to Japan for being such a good contributor and donor, but more resources are needed. We also need to make sure that we protect humanitarian assistance, because we are seeing a fall in humanitarian assistance, a very rapid fall in humanitarian assistance, which is having consequences on some of the investments that have been made using resources from the GCFF. So there also we need to make sure that we understand the link, because there is still a link between some of the humanitarian resources that are needed in countries and resources that are being implemented by the GCFF. We need more agile, predictable, concessional financing. I think that's clear. And I would say, lastly, private sector. We've heard and we've seen and we know how important ensuring that private sector actors, whether they are refugees, internally displaced persons also, but if supporting them and making sure that the resources that are mobilized also support small businesses of people who find themselves in displacement, we know how important it is and how much it can help respond in crisis of forced displacement. So we must make sure that as part of what the GCFF is becoming, financing private sector in different way is also underlined. So that's all I had to say, but really to thank everybody for the support.
Thank you so very much. So I think this was extremely useful, and even though it's almost 7 p.m., that we're all ears and very much enthusiastic about this agenda. So what I heard here is the following: is that one, it's a compounded crisis. We heard about climate, we heard about debt, and it's a protracted crisis. When I was in Adre with our managing director, Anna Bierde, and Filippo Grandi, as we were seeing the influx of refugees from Sudan, we could see that the one from Darfur was still there. So compounded, protracted means that we need long-term solutions. It means as well that it's not only about the cost, we heard that as well, it's about the gain. And we have seen more and more studies that are demonstrating this. Second, national ownership and a coordinated platform of donors and government is key. Number three, we realize that this is a tremendous pressure on service delivery and for low-income and middle-income countries. And this increased access has a cost, and countries need support for that. Number four, it's about economic opportunities. Self-reliance is key. It's not about charity. It's about how we can have that self-reliance and allow refugees to not have those economic opportunities for them, find job through policies, but as well through intervention of private sector. So with that, before getting into where do we see next, let me hand over to, we have other colleagues that have kindly agreed to give their perspective. We have 6 of them, so I count on you to make your remark as brief, as succinct as possible. So I'm going to start with Eric. Eric Meyer is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Africa and Middle East, Department of Treasury for the United States of America. Eric.
Well, thank you, Sukenya, and it's a great pleasure to be here this evening, and really good to see so many friends and supporters of the GCFF.
The mic is not working.
It seems that your mic is not working.
Maintenant?
Yeah, now it's
Okay.
working.
So thank you again. It's good to be here and see so many friends and supporters of the GCFF. I want to thank the bank, UNHCR, and all of the co-sponsors for pulling together this session. It is really impressive to see where we've come to. The United States has been a strong supporter of the GCFF from the beginning. In fact, we championed the effort to transition the Middle East, North Africa concessional financing facility to the global concessional financing facility at the UN General Assembly in 2016. And for the reasons that Frank laid out, we had recognized the value in putting together a facility like this that marries policy dialogue and policy commitments with financing, and that brings together financing on concessional terms that recognizes the value of middle-income countries that are hosting large numbers of refugees. So that was really quite compelling to us, and we thought that there was a basis for being prepared when crises may appear in other parts of the world. And for a few years, there were people who said, we don't know why you did this. It wasn't necessary. But I think what we see now is that this was very helpful to have in place to respond quickly to crises as they developed, first in Latin America, but now in Eastern Europe as well. To date, the United States has provided $135 million in support to the GCFF, and we are in the process of transferring our most recent, or the latest, $5 million installment to the global window in the coming weeks. Let me just close by saying we remain quite committed to the GCFF, and we would urge others to join us in continuing that commitment as we work together to protect refugees, and to provide opportunities and services to both refugees and the host communities that are in which they're residing. Thank you.
I think we have now Mr. Niels Annen, the Parliamentary Secretary of State for BMC.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we are all looking for the award ceremony, so I want to be very quick. Also thank everybody here, and maybe just make 1 or 2 points, because we consider this forum to be a very good opportunity to put a stronger focus on how to support refugees, and I think together we can up with new strategies how to make our support for refugees more sustainable and also more efficient, and I think the facility is a great instrument to achieve that. We believe we need to work harder to enable people to provide for themselves so that they have a future to look forward, and that is precisely what Germany wants to do with its support for refugees' economic participation, and that of course requires education and relevant future-oriented vocational training. That's a sector where we always have been very active, as well as social protection for the most vulnerable. I think the point of economic self-reliance, strengthening people individually, reduces the strain on host communities, and that also, I believe, is an important point. Maybe as a last comment, Germany also supports the further expansion of benefiting countries that has been mentioned. So again, congratulations to Armenia. But I also believe that if there should be a further expansion on the table, that would also require new funding. So we need to discuss about that as well. So I keep it short. Thank you very much. A great institutional setup, I think, that we all can use in a very innovative way. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
So I have on the list now Mr. Greg Houston, Deputy Director, Head of Migration and the Mining Department, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office.
Thank you. And thank you to our speakers. Fantastic to hear the examples and the stories that bring this to life for all of us so that we can really understand what the facility does in the real world. I will also be really quick, but I just wanted to underline 2 points. The first is that we have been a supporter as the United Kingdom from the beginning and very much support the expansion of the facility. This is all about being prepared, which I think a few of our speakers have said. We've all heard the statistics. We've all heard the trends through the course of today. I think we all know where we are headed. So being prepared is really important. And the other point I would want to underline as being important and key for us is this idea of the fund being nimble and being flexible and being able to include facilities from other MDBs as well. So that nimbleness, that flexibility is something that we really value and something we want to keep moving forward in terms of your question about what the future holds. Thank you.
So much. So I have next on the list Mr. Abdi Abdullah, Manager Fragility, Resilience, Climate and Action Department at Islamic Development Bank.
Thank you very much, and I would like also to thank the distinguished panel speakers who have really articulated and covered all the critical issues related to refugees, concessional financing, grants, and also support hosting countries, particularly middle-income countries that have generously hosting refugees and also internally displaced persons. From Islamic Development Bank, we have been part of the beginning and also the establishment of the Global Concessional Financing Facility, and I'm very proud that the first two countries that have benefited from the facility were our member countries, Jordan and Lebanon. And one of the projects that have benefited from the GCFF, I personally witnessed it together with His Excellency, the President of the Islamic Development Bank. And the results and impacts were very impressive. And I think this kind of concessional financing facility will not only help those countries to bear the pressure of the refugees, but also encourage them to take more based on the available development financing resources. Second, as you know, concessional financing and grants are very limited in the development financing. So the facility brings that window which enables those countries to blend both loan and also grants and resources to support livelihood development, education, and other sectors in the development of the refugees. And finally, I would like to add and reiterate the Islamic Development Bank commitment to closely work with all the partners of the GCFF to really expand and support other countries that are ready to participate. And I think given some of the members have mentioned that this crisis is increasing, whether we like it or not, it's happening. And I think we need to be better prepared. I agree that we need to think about how can we also support other countries like Jordan, Egypt, and also Turkey, who are also hosting significant number of refugees. And I think it's the right time to think about reaching out also other countries, middle-income countries that are hosting significant number of refugees. So I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdi. I have two others. I have Felipe, Mr. Felipe Munoz, Head of Migration at the Inter-American Development Bank.
Thank you very much. As Eric said, Latin America is now part of the Global Refugee Forum with Colombia, Ecuador, and Costa Rica. And the IDB is an implementation support agency. We and the GCFF has proved an extremely useful tool for helping the countries. We did an operation in Colombia, and as the Vice Minister Taylor said, we can really work with the government to change the policies, Frank, as you said, which is important. It's not only the operation by itself, it's all the changes in the policy forever that we can help with the resources of the GCFF. And the thing is that you mentioned, the JICA's president mentioned about the nexus, and I think the three countries in Latin America, Colombia, Ecuador, and Costa Rica, are in, as we call, a second generation challenge process. They are thinking about housing, red subsidies, thinking about the pension system, thinking about, because they don't see anymore this is a humanitarian temporal crisis. They see it now as a development opportunity because all the people are going to stay for a long term there. Then we need some work with the donors, work with the other ISAs, and work with the countries to try to get some resources for the Latin American window, because I think this is a right opportunity, and these three countries are in another stage, and we don't want, of course, to compete with the other windows that have their own needs, but I think this is another story, and we can make Latin American story as a success case. Thank you, Spiros, for all your support.
And now our newest member, Mr. Vahan Kostian, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Armenia.
That's actually a different speaker. My name is Armen Ghazarian. I'm head of the migration service, but that's fine. But as the newest kid on the block and basically a newborn, I will be very short. And we thank you very much for agreeing to include Armenia also as a beneficiary country for the GCFF. And, you know, the colleague from the Netherlands has described our situation. What was different actually from many types of displacement was the intensity. We have received about 100,000 people in a span of basically 10 days. And that's a tremendous strain on all kinds of services and availability in the country. Having also some protracted refugee situations from a war 2 years ago and from the first Karabakh war about 30 years ago, and the results of ethnic cleansings in Azerbaijan. So this was the situation which we found ourselves basically 2 months ago. And we are very much determined to get the most of what we can from GCFF and partner in the future. We think that middle-income countries need this support very much, and we appreciate your engagement and your agility as well. Thank you very much. We'll continue to cooperate. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I know that we are a group of enthusiastic fans of GCFF, but I know that we're standing between you and your cocktail, right? And that this was a very long day. So just 4 messages that I don't know about you, but as a takeaway for me. First, it's prevention. We know that those crises, those refugees are here because there's a crisis or conflict. So preventing conflict, including in middle-income countries, is something that may need our attention. For either countries, yes, we have some instruments as on diagnostic, on financing tool, but prevention of conflicts to look at the root causes of forcibly displaced people is key. Second, we heard it, preparedness. We know that those crises are here to stay. You know that some countries are bordering countries with conflict, so preparedness for a country is key. Number 3, partnership. No single institution can do this alone. No single government entity can handle this. So it's about having all hands on deck to address this issue. And number 4, looking forward, we have not only to take stock of what we have achieved and lessons learned, but we have to scale up in terms of funding, but as well number of countries, while trying to be flexible, agile, and predictable. With that, thank you so very much.